be allowed to testify about. Hoffinger, the prosecutor, says they're being careful to omit some details that are, quote, too salacious. Again, this is where we are as a country right now, that we are having this discussion and this debate in the courtroom. And Dana Bash, I guess it's good that the prosecutor says that they're going to omit some details that are too salacious. The prosecutor is also saying, quote, in terms of the sexual act, it will be very basic. I can't believe I have to read this on television. It's not going to involve any descriptions.
Better you than me, Jake.
It's not going to involve any descriptions of anything in particular. So
just read it. Read it on the screen.
The idea of the detail of this and how humiliating or detailed it's going to be or needs to be is very much being debated right now. And I'm assuming the jury is not there. They're talking about this before Stormy Daniels, who will not be the first witness today, we're told, at least according to the defense attorneys, the second witness. But it is this encounter between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump, alleged encounter, I should say, because he still says it never happened. This alleged encounter happened in 2006. He was married to Melania Trump, who he's still married to. She had just had their son, Barron. And it is this encounter that has prompted all of this, not necessarily the encounter itself, but trying to hide this encounter, allegedly, from the American people in October 2016, right before the presidential election. Right now, Todd Blanche, the Trump attorney, is whispering to Trump as Hoffinger, the prosecutor, talks about Stormy Daniels on the witness stand. Dana, Hoffinger says, it's important for us to elicit how she came to have sex with him and how she felt about it. I'm not quite sure why it's important for them to elicit that. Nichols, the Trump's attorney, Susan Nichols, reiterates that this is a case about books and records, which is true. She's correct about that. Dana.
Well, maybe it's all true.
Yeah.
Look, this is, by all accounts, understandably, the testimony that Donald Trump has been most concerned about, most worried about when it comes to everything, but probably most importantly, his family. And this is the kind of conversation, well, Mershon says it's fine to elicit that Trump and Daniels had sex, that's fine, but we don't need to know the details, the judge says.
Nope, we don't.
And I think I speak for the American people when I say
thank you.
Thank you, Judge
Your
Mershon.
Honor,
I appreciate it. Yes. The judge is saying that he agrees with Trump's attorneys that Stormy.
If you would, where and how you first encountered Mr. Trump inside that hotel suite. Daniels, I said hello, met Trump right there, and I said hello. And he wanted to go into the living area. He was wearing silk or satin pajamas.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize. This is
no.
I'm sorry. I just had to laugh.
This is, by the way, and it's just getting started.
I know.
So he was, according to Daniels, silk or satin pajamas. She said, I made fun of him and said, does Hugh Hefner know you stole his pajamas? I told him to go and change. So he obliged very politely, according to Stormy. Hoffinger, what were you doing then? I was just walking around. It happened very quickly. People, again, Daniels, often think that the kind of hotels that we are used to being in, it's a bed and a dresser, but this hotel room was 3 times the size of my apartment. Again, the importance of details.
Right. And, Katie, we know this from long ago when you were a prosecutor and I was a public defender. The idea is, you want to demonize the defendant. That's what prosecutors are trying to do. The defense is trying to humanize the defendant. This is all trying to make him look so bad, right? It's not all going to the elements of the crime, but the jury's going to see all these things that she's saying, and they're going to get that ick factor. I mean, you laughed out loud when you heard about the pajamas. They're not gonna like it.
No, and she tells him to go and change. I mean, clearly what is happening here is you do not have to be a genius to figure this out, right? He's in satin pajamas. She thinks she's coming for dinner. What is his intent, right? And again, it's not the salaciousness of that interaction, no matter how fleeting it ended up being at the end of the day. It is, why would Trump be embarrassed about this information getting out? And maybe even just the silk pajamas could be be something that he doesn't want to get out. But at the end of the day, he wanted to make sure none of this was heard because he didn't want it to hurt his campaign.
That as you were talking to Jake, we're hearing more from Stormy Daniels on the stand. The then businessman, Donald Trump, showed a photo of himself on the cover of a magazine, asked if she had seen it, and he said, no, not that I have, I didn't watch or look at magazines like that as a 27-year-old film star. And now Daniel says she snapped at Trump. Are you always this rude? Are you always this arrogant and pompous? You don't even know how to have a conversation, she recalls. I'm guessing even back then, assuming that this is true since she's under oath, that's not the way a lot of people talked to Donald Trump, even before he was in politics. But Anthony, I want to ask you about the Melania Trump of it all. There was just a reference to her when Stormy Daniels just testified that Trump told Stormy Daniels that the two of them don't sleep in the same room. And this goes back to one of the core questions of this case, which is whether or not he was only trying to protect his family and marriage, or whether he was also trying to protect his political viability. And before you answer that, I'm going to read one more update from our reporters. Daniels says she told Trump of the magazine, "Someone should spank you." With that, I'm sorry, Anthony.
Well, I mean, listen. I mean, there's a simple answer. And remember, Dana, when the window's open and you hear clippity clop outside, it's a horse, it's not a zebra. So the obvious answer is the answer. And so he had two things going on in his mind. One, he didn't want the exposure personally as it related to his family life. And secondarily, he knew that this could be a big bomb that blew up on him politically. And
keep a straight face. We're going to hear the word spanking. We're going to hear the word Trump, Stormy Daniels, and the best thing, it's all on Fox. And Katie McEnany and Harris Faulkner are going to have a bit of a, what, they can't cope. Apparently, Trump's life, his private life, is, well, it's pornographic as they see it. They don't mention the fact that Melania Trump had just had Barron Trump, and he's meant to be a very evangelical figure, you know, very family-orientated father figure. I would think that is something which is more significant as regards to the sordid details. But hey, I'm not Katie McEnany. I wonder if she knew about any of these things. I mean, she was quite close to the source, by the way. Quite close to the source.
And then she recounted when she met the former president at a charity golf tournament in Lake Tahoe in 2006. She said she playfully spanked him on the rear with a rolled-up magazine. Her publicist then encouraged her to meet Mr. Trump. She said when she then went up to his hotel penthouse suite to have dinner with him, he was wearing silk or satin pajamas, she said, just like Hugh Hefner, she said. He then changed. She said at one point she went to the bathroom, and when she emerged, Trump was lying on the bed in his boxers and T-shirt. And then she did describe having sex with him on the bed. She described that in detail, saying she was not threatened by him, but that she did black out, that it seemed that the room was spinning. Well, during her testimony, the former president at times could be seen shaking her head. After a break, Judge Merchan admonished the prosecutors for getting into too much detail. Prosecutors will likely this afternoon ask her why she was paid the money by Michael Cohen to keep her alleged affair from embarrassing Trump and hurting the family, or to influence the 2016 presidential race. Legal experts are pointing out that she likely never had a conversation directly with the former president about the agreement, or if it was intended to help his presidential campaign, as prosecutors say. And others point out a non-disclosure agreement like the one she signed is legal. The former president has always denied that he had any type of affair with Ms. Daniels, even though she has been claiming that for many years now. And during the prosecution questioning of her, Judge Merchan sustained many defense objections. That means the judge has basically been siding with the Trump defense, trying not to get too many details onto the record. Back to you, Kaylee.
Eric Shawn, thank you very much. You know, Emily, I'm very interested in a conversation that took place this morning with the judge. And you had the prosecutor saying, we want to get into these details. We want to get into the details of sex acts in a hotel room. They said they will not go into details of genitalia, but they want to get into details of a sex act, to which the defense replied, this is in no way relevant. We're talking about a campaign finance violation here, one that's unprecedented. Let's point that out. To begin with, this case shouldn't have survived a motion to defense, but that was the setting this morning. And Mark Eiglarsh earlier in the day talked about Rule 403 and federal rules of evidence, where you determine if evidence is probative or prejudicial. Well, I want to pull up, this is the New York Rule of Evidence, exclusion of relevant evidence. A court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is outweighed by the danger that its admission would, this is really important, number one, create undue prejudice to a party. Number two, confuse the issue and mislead the jury. Number three, prolong the proceedings to an unreasonable extent without any corresponding advantage to the offering party. Stormy Daniels doesn't know about paperwork, doesn't know about the Trump Organization. So why under those rules would a judge allow her to take the stand?
Well, and I think taking it a step further, as that is construed as evidence, it's frankly simply testimony, right? And at its heart, it's salacious testimony by a witness that is there under subpoena, obviously for the prosecution. But for what reason? And I state that because, as you said, this at its heart is a business records falsification charge. And the reason that it's been elevated to a felony in the DA's eyes is because it is allegedly hiding a fraudulent intent to cover up a subsequent crime. So the issue here is not whether indeed it happened, which is why this volume of salacious details is not only irrelevant, but it is, yes, prejudicial. And the whole point about the evidence I am trying to make is that it has nothing to do with the records whatsoever. I note that what we are seeing is such a terrifying display of a clear intent to humiliate a presidential candidate, because we know, as we just heard, Kayleigh, that the details will be splashed across the newspapers and the media and all alike, while totally ignoring the underlying charge here, the elements that have yet to be satisfied, and the reasons why they aren't there. This is smoke and mirrors, and we are being distracted.
Harris, the judge said the degree of detail is unnecessary. So why do we continue to hear the degree of detail?
But he only said that a little while ago when court reconvened. We've heard a lot already, and part of that is because the flip in the case of Harvey Weinstein, because it was based on so much extracurricular information that came into the case with testimony that either went too long, went too wide, or wasn't needed at all. At one point, we heard from Lydia Hugh, who is our Fox News, Fox Business correspondent there. She's also an attorney. She said, it looks like Judge Merchan is letting this testimony in because prosecutors say it shows the story that Trump wanted to conceal by using falsified business records around the election, meaning all of that sex talk. I mean, the texture of it about, well, he didn't have on a condom, but in my adult business life, that was always required. I mean, some of the details are beyond salacious. They are pornographic, quite frankly, and that's her specialty. So I would imagine she'd be good at that. And so what Lydia says is, in fact, at one point, prosecutors said today how Stormy felt after her encounter with Trump is important to the case. I'm with Emily on this. Which receipt? What actual evidence does how she felt? You know, she says, well, I was staring at the ceiling and I don't remember everything from that point. I wasn't drugged, though. Oh, were you drugged? Did you drink alcohol? No, I didn't. I mean, things are creeping into this because she's letting that happen, because she's driving it. It's completely immaterial to the case.
Now, while we saw Lisa describe what she saw from the overflow room, you, Harry, were actually inside the courtroom. And so much of what you saw and experienced are things that are being processed, potentially even now, by members of the jury. And so we want you to take us inside that room, what you saw, what you felt, and any interaction between the president and Stormy Daniels and that jury.
I can speak to the first. There wasn't any, but there was a lot to see, especially with the jury. We're talking about a very, very colorful witness who detailed kinds of events and just efforts and ways of being that I think for the jury were fairly foreign. She spoke very quickly, nervously. She told a lot of jokes, and not all of them landed. As Lisa said, Merchan was quick to sustain objections and clearly thought there was too much detail being given to the jury. I watched the jury very carefully, and I thought in particular there were 3 or 4 who were maybe not with her and others who were. All the basics of Michael Cohen's story, everything we've heard so far, she substantiates. But she does this in a very wild, sort of super colorful way that I think for some of the jurors maybe made their heads spin a bit. And there is this basic question about, she almost seems to have experienced the sex itself as sort of surreal, yet a year ensues where she continues to be in touch with them, and she says the ultimate NDA she wanted to enter into because she was afraid based on a encounter in a parking lot that Trump was trying to actually silence her, and she wanted him out of the picture as well. She disclaimed money having anything really to do with it. My basic feeling is like, wow, this is a colorful, maybe hyper-colorful witness.
But how much was the jury also watching Donald Trump and maybe his reaction to some of those very just, let's say, details of that sexual encounter?
Right. So I looked for that pretty carefully. It was mainly on Stormy. They were taking her in. I was looking at Trump some, and he had a general kind of impassiveness, not glowering exactly, but obviously not happy. But the basic dynamic was jury to Stormy, and then again, I haven't seen Merchan in this trial be so sort of irritated, and it came across, I think, as being irritated with her level of detail. That's something, if you're the DA, you're worried about, because you don't want them to think that he, the judge, is actually displeased in any way with the witness.
During this lunch break, I would pick the prosecution team, because I can only imagine. We've seen, based on our reporters in the court, how upset Donald Trump seems to be and urging his attorneys to be interjecting more, to object more. I've little doubt he is giving them an earful right now about what he wants to see moving forward.
Yeah, he's been really scrutinizing his defense lawyers. I saw it yesterday with Todd Blanche's cross of an accounting official from the Trump organization. Trump twisted his entire body and was watching everything Todd said. Today, he's gotten a little physical with Susan Nicholas, one of his lawyers, sort of hitting her on the arm, prompting her to object. He's had these spirited conversations with all 3 of them. He clearly has a lot of ideas about exactly how this defense should be carried out. At this point, it's unclear who will cross Stormy Daniels, but you know, whoever does it, they're getting an earful from their client right now.
And I think the takeaway, the picture that our team in the room and you guys have been talking about of the Necklace lawyer being basically prompted to object. I think she was reading something at the time and was basically like, Stormy Daniels is so different than anybody else we've seen up to this point, right? You had David Pecker, who I think they were still very friendly to some degree. You had people that were in the Trump organization, and even you had Hope Hicks, who was a former advisor, and clearly there's still some kindness there or appreciation for one another. This is a different witness than we've seen up to this point. If you want to have any sense of how Trump is going to feel when Michael Cohen eventually gets on the stand, you're getting a little bit of it here, but we just haven't seen him confronted by somebody like this, particularly with these personal stories at that level of detail. How he responds after the trial may be just as interesting as how he responds during.
Yeah.
More